Howdy, folks, and welcome to the TuneScore podcast. My name's Cary Nightingale. With me, as always, is Kevin Niebrick. Kevin, how you doing tonight?
About 92% this time.
Even better. We'll take small wins whenever we can get them. But I hope you're excited for tonight's episode because we recently promised that we were going to take the red marker on our own songs and hopefully show that we can take criticism as well as we can give it. Because that's a really important part of musicianship and being a songwriter, being someone who creates, if you can call what we do creation. I've nominated one of my songs, This Love to Wrestle, under my artist name Wolfwhistle. Kevin, we've got your Faux Bond intro under your YouTube channel, Imagine If We Had Tried to Write a Song a Week. You're lucky I'm not critiquing your name there. Let's go through them and hopefully have a meaningful conversation about what we're looking for in compositions and everything else, and maybe what we can do as, let's face it, amateur songwriters and musicians, what we can do better and what we recognize about ourselves and maybe what we don't yet recognize. So we'll start off with This Love to Wrestle by me. Kev, go ahead and prosecute the composition.
All right, so where to start? So we can look at melody, to which my question would be, what melody? Jokes. All right, no, it starts off strong. But the one thing I noticed was that the melody throughout your piece kind of fades into the background really quickly. So having like we can talk more about constructive criticism afterwards, but that's the first thing I noticed. The lyrics, as always, in your writing, are my favorite part. My favorite line, if all I now arouse in you is suspicion, cast me into the sea or heal this division. I thought that was really nice. The rhythm I liked, it was pretty strong. The harmony, because the melody score was a little bit lower, the harmony score got a little bit lower as well. Ended up with a Wolfwhistle got a 2.3 out of 4 for composition for this song. How would you rate your own composition, sir?
Well, since I'm in defense of my composition, I actually did rate it slightly higher. This is where it's important to be receptive to the criticism of someone who has ears that are not your own. I can absolutely agree. I did not write a vocal melody for this per se. And since I can't sing, I had to rely on melodic contour with my speaking voice. But we recently listened to Werewolves of London that has sort of a similar delivery to the lyrics. And I rated that at half credit for the melody. So I did the same for my melody in This Love to Wrestle. I can tell you about how I composed it, which is a little different than the take that we would usually get. I tried to put a little added interest in the harmonic structure by having a lot of upper extensions on the chords that I was playing and having different chord progressions for each section. So this was my first intentional foray also into odd time signatures, using 9/8 for the verses, 5/4 for the chorus, and 7/4 for the bridge. Totally uncalled for. I suspect it's more challenging to others' ears than mine, since it's also familiar to me by this point. And lastly, I'd say I'm actually proud of the lyrics in that they provide imagery, stay in the neighborhood of a rhyme scheme, and avoid repetitions. They also avoid hooks, if I'm being honest. And they use a lot of expensive words. So I rated it at a 2.5 out of 4 for the composition.
Pretty close, though.
We're in the ballpark. For the performance, there are small mistakes in pretty much every element of the performance. And that's to be expected with the 3 lead guitars that are all improvised. But it's really not forgivable on the vocals, which had already been heavily compromised by being spoken rather than sung. The chorus has a syllable structure on each line of 3 syllables, then 3 syllables. But I goofed it on limiting our advance. So I put 4 syllables, then 2. Everything else I think was consistent. So maybe just because I know I did it, I recognized it after I'd already published the song, it irked me to no end. So half credit on performance. Production, I think there's a little bit of unevenness to the mix, particularly in the volume of that clean guitar in the left channel. It sounds a little too bassy. I think it's a bold choice to leave in the foot pedal switch clicks in the final mix, which you hear a couple of times when I turn on and off a distortion pedal in the middle and then at the end of the song. I will say the way the guitars build at the end of the bridge may have been accidental because I was improvising one guitar at a time and doing three guitars, but I think it sounds brilliant. So I think that's a production choice to leave it in that I made, and I'll give myself credit for it. So zero point 0.6 out of 1.2 for the performance and 0.7 out of 1.2 for the production. And I think I was pretty charitable to myself for that. Kevin, will you be as charitable?
I think we were pretty close on both of those, actually. I gave you a little bit more credit for performance. You ended up with a 1.8 out of 1.2. The notes I had, accuracy, I gave you about halfway. I wrote sing, damn it, but that's a joke. I actually love spoken word songs generally if they're delivered right. And I think that your voice in particular lends well to it. I know that you're not a super fan, you'd rather sing. I know that you're not your biggest fan. We've met, but it is something that you're good at. I can't do spoken word. I sound like a cartoon character. The other note I had was that as far as the performance goes, it was highly improvisational. I think that if you revisited those guitar solos, it would be something like they're not bad in and of themselves. They're great. But it sounds more to me like noodling because it's improvisational and they were written independently of one another. But you could build them specifically to kind of fit and intermingle with each other, at least at the beginning. And we'll talk more about this, but kind of starting at the same point and then diverging across the song. That might be interesting, just a choice that you maybe had not considered. The feel is excellent for the piece. And I really like that you have at least the two guitars I could hear crying, kind of doing two different things. It sounds like two lovers quarreling. As far as production goes, I gave you a 0.6 out of 1.2. It was lower for the mix than it was for the arrangement. Don't have any problems with the arrangement. I like the different time signatures. I thought it was very interesting, and it kept my interest through the piece. The vocals are too quiet. It's often hard to hear what you're saying. And again, the melody disappears right away for me behind the guitar solos on either side. I think for structure, it would be nice to have like a consistent guitar riff or bass line throughout the piece. I did hear what I thought was a bass, but I think that you just clarified that was the one clean guitar that you had. It struck me more as a bass as well, actually.
There was both. There is a bass just playing whole notes to underline the chords, and that's mixed right in the center, so it's low and center. You hear it at your chin.
Mm-hmm.
But then the clean guitar that's in the left channel, I was just playing low on the neck on that, and that's what I described as sounding too bassy.
Okay.
Particularly early in the song where I hadn't moved up on the neck in the higher register yet.
Right on. I see what you're saying. But yeah, and I wrote that same note that I would just love to hear, again, this is all take this or leave this. This is just ideas thrown out. But I really love the idea if you started at the same point in the beginning of the song and then diverged with your solos into doing something completely different by the end and kind of build up to it, ramp up to it. That would make an interesting layer to it. Let me just dive into appeal here for Wolf Whistle. Wolf Whistle got a 2.8. The emotion does just hit me. So it got a 1.3 out of 1.6, which is common for that for me. Innovation, I've never heard anything like it. The time signatures, I just like the idea of the piece. Got a 0.3 out of 0.4. Repeat listenability for me is still pretty high, 1.2 out of 1.6. And that was my only note, was the idea. I stuck with that idea of like having the solos diverge throughout the piece. Overall, you got 6.5.
Wow.
It's not terribly low. And that's higher than 3 songs that we knowingly didn't like in the last episode. But I think that that's fair given that there's a large amount of points in the appeal section. And so if enough things don't work together, that appeal score is going to be lower. But I think that you've got strong bones here. I think this is an excellent song. I consider my own works, always just a work in progress, but I don't know how you feel about your own song. What do you think? Defend it to the death.
So technically, you should have been in defense because I rated this lower in both appeal and overall tune score. So for appeal, for me, 2.3 out of 3.6. It is highly emotional. It has a high emotional value for me, but it's really just because I wrote it and I know the story of romantic frustration that the lyrics hint at but obscure the details. You'll never know those details, but I do. There are a few things that I really like about this recording and the way that I did it, but I know that my dark sensibilities and personal taste are not shared commonly with everybody else. I hope others might hear something in the track that they like, but even more, I'd love for somebody else to cover it, get irresponsibly successful, and give me royalties. So my overall tune score for this was a 6.1 out of 10. I absolutely love your idea, Kev, about taking a single musical idea with two guitars in the beginning and having them diverge into distinct, separate musical ideas as the song progresses. And I think if I were to make this song again, which I won't, that's feedback that I can take into the next track, the next wolf whistle effort. So it's certainly something that I'll take into consideration and hopefully use. I would also be more intentional with that feeling. This was me when I first improv'd all those guitars. Not only was I dicking around for the first time with jazz harmony and with odd time signatures,
Yeah.
it was also the first time that I was using a lot of guitar pedals. And I think it was after I'd gotten a flanger, but before I'd gotten the volume pedal, because the volume pedal in conjunction with the flanger can make this really nice C wave kind of a texture. And I've done it in a couple other tracks, but not in this one. If I were to do it again, I would be much more intentional about matching the guitar parts to the imagery of being lost at sea, but that sea is a romantic relationship.
I really like that stuff too. That's like one of my favorite things. That like is probably overlooked, and most people don't get it. But I love when you try to mimic a sound or like a rhythm or something that would fit the story itself. I know that most people don't even hear that stuff, but I always do. Like I always hear that stuff, or I can sense where it should be. Good examples are like what Sarah said with it's Death Cab for Cutie. They try to write a song about someone who's dying in the hospital, and the piano melody sounds like an EKG meter, which is very interesting. It's like making a lot of boop, boop, boop. It's making a lot of that noise. Most people probably don't even hear that. They might not have intentionally done it, but I love that stuff. So that would be cool.
That sounds like it was probably intentional.
I would
Maybe
think.
let's put that on the list for something to tune score later. But that said, it's time for a short break. This one's brought to you by Anxiety Succulent, the all-new emotional support cactus. Who'd have thought such a prick could be so comforting? We'll be right back. Howdy, folks, and welcome back. We just had a good discussion about one of my songs, and we're about to have what I hope is a good discussion about one of Kevin's songs. Now, one slight difference about the way we receive critique on this is My song's already out there. It's published. It's public. It could make me literally tens of dollars if you go listen to it many, many times. Whereas Kevin's is considered a work in progress right now. Would you say that's a fair representation, Kev?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. So Kevin's feedback for me and my self-reflection on my song will be used in a slightly different way. Hopefully, though, anything that we come up with in this upcoming conversation about Kevin's faux bond intro, he'll be able to use as that song evolves into hopefully something that he can sell and make royalties or record again, whatever.
Not going to happen with this one. I wrote a Bond theme song for a movie that doesn't exist that nobody asked me to write. So this one's a little more of a tough sell, I think.
I don't know. We'll see. Let's get through the entire thing, and then let's see who the potential market audience could be for it. But since it's Kev's, I'll go ahead and begin with my prosecution of the composition. This song, Faux Bond Intro, has a stupid name, and so does his channel. But the composition of the song rated at a 3.0 out of 4 available points. I thought it was really strong in a lot of regards. The melody was solid, if a little too bluesy at times. The line that struck me on was, and they'll be absolutely right. It was that fancy thing, Kev, that you put in the left channel. The rhythm with its syncopation and the harmony with the multiple key changes are both outstanding and are really evocative of the archetypical Bond theme. I have some misgivings with a few word choices, starting with the title. I think it should be The Last Laugh, since that would evoke the closest thing to a hook that you wrote in the song. I have other suggested changes in the lyrics, but I'll just put that on the screen for our YouTube audience. I did like the cleverness of many of the lyrics, especially cut the puller from the strings, clip the madmen of their wings, and collect your pound of flesh, and retrace your path from its inception, every step that led you here, to watch it all just disappear. I think much of Kevin's lyric writing is epically beautiful. So 3.0 out of 4.0 for the composition. If you made some changes to the lyrics, I think it could be that much better. Kev, defend your composition if you would, please.
All right. No, we were pretty close. That last line that you mentioned, not my favorite. Spent some time on the lyrics, but I agree that there's a little work there to be done. Rated pretty decently high from me. Again, I wrote the song. I love it. My favorite line, they'll say you crossed the line, you've lost all control, that you're out of your mind, and they'll be absolutely right. And I tried to do like a ASMR feel to that ineffectively. The lyrics were fun to write, but basically it's a string of idioms, and a lot of the imagery, I tried to be creative and come up with some of my own or put a Kevin spin on it. But for the most part, it's just a lot of identifiable idioms and references. I'd normally hate having so many in one song. In this particular case, I think that, it's appropriate for a Bond theme. I could have held back, though, a little bit more. I had trouble finding the right speed to play this was the other thing that I really took points away from myself on, for the rhythm especially. It starts off really too fast, but it does settle in right after the intro, and you get over it. But right away, that's the first thing I noticed, that stark contrast. Performance, I gave myself a 0.8 out of 1.2. My vocal delivery is unsatisfactory. It's incredibly hard, for me anyway. It's difficult to place the correct emphasis on a syllable in order to deliver that line correctly, especially with this particular song. I'm not sure why, but there's believe me, I ran through a lot of vocal takes to try it, and I got close to what I was looking for, but never really landed on it. I'd rather have a professional singer take a stab at this one than try to build a proper recording environment in my noisy apartment. But I did the best I could with the things I have, and I think that's that's what we're gonna do until we start making money off this stuff. The one thing I did like was I loved my piano solo and the structured key change around 340. Very proud of that. I thought it landed pretty well. So 0.8 out of 1.2 for performance. Production, I need a producer. The instrumentation is either too high or too low. I blended everything to the best of my ability so far. But as you mentioned in your own critique of your own song, that a lot of the time when we're writing songs now, we're still running into those first attempts. And so this is my first attempt to do an orchestration, try to put together a whole bunch of different parts and try to balance those out and mix them out. I did the best I could so far, that I'm able to do so far, but still a lot of room to grow. And that was pretty much it. I got 0.7 out of 1.2 for production. What'd you give me?
Well, I gave you what you earned, Kevin,
Oh,
which was a zero point 0.6 out of 1.2 for the performance and a 0.8 out of 1.2 for the production.
deal.
So for the performance, the instrumentation is all excellent in the way it's played or programmed. It's the vocal delivery. It seems far too restrained in this recording in a way that holds the whole track back. And I guess that's what you get when you're more concerned with waking the neighbors than singing your heart out. Think about Tom Jones and how he would belt out a tune. He did a Bond theme. That could be you, Kev. The mix suffers slightly due to the restrained vocal volume and one point when the strings became the main instrument, but they developed, I think, a little bit too quietly. And I forgot to notate at what point that was, but you'll probably find it if you look for it. My only knock against the arrangement is that it did not end on a slow strum of an E minor 9 chord, which is really the only way to end a Bond theme. As far as appeal goes, this one rated at a 2.9 out of 3.6. While I don't care for a few lyrical choices, like what does tooth to a tumbler even mean? Or the board may be firm, but it's icy and thin. But this is a fresh take on a Bond intro song that no one asked you to write. It provides a lot of imagery. Frankly, it's reminiscent of Skyfall, which is most people's favorite Daniel Craig Bond appearance. Not mine, that would be Quantum of Solace. But this is a thoughtfully crafted track, and there's so much to discover on repeat listens that I think it's absolutely well worth the audience's time to give it a listen. This rated actually really highly for me. The overall TuneScore for Faux Bond Intro, which is the stupidest name ever, at a 7.3 out of 10. And I really hope that you stop worrying about waking your neighbors and actually belt one out the next time, because I think you're too critical of your voice in the same way that you think I'm too critical of mine, except I'm right. Kev, this is your track. I know it appeals to you, but defend.
Not much to defend here. I think it's a work in progress. It ended up with a 2.1 out of for appeal for me. I like that it builds. I like that there's some key changes in there. I like that there's a lot of instrumentation. And it was a lot of fun to come up with this. Again, the message isn't very strong because I'm not telling a story that really exists. I'm just kind of making one up. So the lyrics themselves, I had less to go on and stuff. But it was a lot of fun. I can't wait to hear the finished product. And Faux Bond Intro is not as bad a name as Throwaway Spaghetti Western. I think that was... Actually, maybe that's a better name. But it ended up with a 6.5. Room to grow.
Okay. So there you have it, folks. We've subjected our own songs to critique. We would love also to invite you, not necessarily for our own commercial gain, but invite you to listen to these tracks if you choose to. But if you do, let us know what you thought. Give us that critique that hopefully you get from us as well. And if you have songs that you would like for us to critique, let us know about those as well. Kevin, did we learn anything today?
I think so. I think what we learned is this is an excellent process for figuring out a new direction that you can go in your song. What did you miss while you were composing your song? Is there something you overlooked? A sound that might fit the feel of the piece, or a structure that might be interesting to explore? I think that getting feedback from someone else, especially with the tool you use here, the TuneScore, I think it's really effective at finding those things that might make your sound a little bit more interesting. What I'm looking for when I get criticism from you specifically, from anybody really, is like, give me three things that I can do that are really minimal effort that'll really increase the listenability of my song. And I think you've done that effectively with my review, and I hope that I gave you some, at least some ideas of directions to go in with your song. Again, you should always, it's advice is kind of like take it or leave it, but if it gets even just a little thought in your brain to kind of like, oh yeah, why didn't I try that? Then it's been useful and it's been helpful. And you might find that if you critically listen to the songs that you like, or try to do the same thing that we're doing, I think you'll find yourself critically listening to your own music as you're composing it, and you're like, oh, I should try this new thing. So I think this has been really helpful, and this podcast is really getting my wheels turning.
Awesome. I would say the big takeaway for me is it's okay to ask for help. And frankly, it's important to get another set of ears on your song. I really wish that I had asked you for very critical feedback, you or maybe anybody, before releasing This Love to Wrestle out in the world, and frankly, most of my other tunes. If for no other reason than I could have learned early on that I need to write a melody, or I need to write guitar parts rather than just hoping that I nail it in the improvisation section. So it's a really good exercise to undertake, but it's important to go in with an open mind and an open heart so that you can accept the feedback for what it's worth.
And I think the best thing you can do is just, the more songs you write, the easier it's going to get. The less firsts you're going to run into. Well, this is the first time I've had to do an orchestration, or this is the first time I had to play with a new pedal. I don't know what it's going to sound like. Let's see how it goes. Once you get over those first encounters and you do it again and again, you're going to figure out, you're going to dial it in. You're going to tune in that aspect, whatever it may be. You're going to get better and better.
Yep. Nobody ever said making music was easy. And if they did, it was probably Warren Zevon writing Werewolves of London in 15 minutes. I think it's time to end. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. That's been Kevin Niebrick. I've been Cary Nightingale. We'll see you in the next one.